Well, good morning, everyone, or whatever time it is when you're turning into this recorded Zoom link. My name is Craig Edmondson. I am a science consultant with Heartland AEA, serving regions northern half of 1, 6, 7, and 8. And I will be taking you through this Zoom session today entitled Effective Questioning in Secondary Science, Part 1. This is the first day of this Zoom session, and the second part will be tomorrow at the same time, and I will be recording that one also. Once again, Craig Edmondson, science consultant for Heartland AEA, and this is Effective Questioning in Secondary Science. First thing I would like to make you aware of is that I have prepared a Google Slide program for this Zoom session, and that is here in the chat room. So if you just go to this link right here and click on that link, that will take you to the Google slide deck from this tiny URL, and you have access to that Google slideshow 24/7, 365, for as long as I keep it filed away, which I have no intention on getting rid of it anytime soon. So you will always have that available to you, and you can follow along at your leisure with that. So I want to take you and share my screen with you of that Google Slide program. Okay, and here it is. Here again, Effective Questioning in Secondary Science, Part 1. My contact information, cedmondson@heartlandaea.org. These days, in light of COVID-19, the best way to get in touch with me is through email. So please do that if you have any questions, concerns, comments you would like to make, you need any assistance in anything having to do with Heartland AEA, I am one of the contacts. And at the end of the program today, I will show you how you can be in touch with the other two science consultants, Ashley Delaney or Adam Puterbaugh at Heartland AEA. Okay. Once again, the tiny URL for access, you might want to bookmark that so you can come back to this slideshow. And I will be adding to this slideshow right later this afternoon for part 2 for tomorrow. Okay. So I believe that's everything to get started this morning. Let's go ahead and so effective questioning in the classroom. What is effective questioning and why is effective questioning important for classroom instruction? I will be asking you a few times throughout the duration of this Zoom session to just pause the video and go ahead and reflect. Maybe you have a science journal, science notebook or something you can take notes in, or some location where you can just do some private reflecting and brainstorming for yourself. If you would happen to be sitting in with a group of other teachers, I would encourage you to pair up or have a small group discussion related to some things that I'll be talking about this morning. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to do just that. If you would pause and consider these two questions related to effective questioning. What is effective questioning? And why is effective questioning important for classroom instruction? Go ahead and pause the video and come back at your leisure, and we'll get started again here soon. Okay, well, welcome back. In regards to effective questioning, in regards to is asking questions, is really essential for checking student understanding, making sure students are on track with the lesson objectives that you have put in place. Plus, effective questioning helps keep students engaged in the process related to your learning objectives and keeps the students on task regarding where you want them to be in regards to your lesson. So effective questioning is crucial to the way students receive and process information, and it encourages independent and critical thinking. The way you pose a question to students and the type of questions you ask will really help determine their interest level in the topic that you're presenting. Statistics have shown, that the average teacher asks about 300 to 400 questions per day. That's quite a lot, and what's the quality of those questions and how do those questions relate to what your students know and what you want your students to know? It's really important to make sure that the questions we're asking are directly aligned with our learning objectives and are relevant to the students' real world, real life situations. To have the desired effect, these questions need to be effective, they need to be well considered and well thought out, and yet they have to be challenging for your students. So we want to make sure that the questions we're asking in the classroom really engage students in the process of learning. So what is effective questioning? What's it all about? The way I think about effective questioning in the classroom is I want students to just not be answering questions and going through a series of just raising their hand and replying to a question that I've asked, but I want the questions to be so engaging that we more or less open a dialogue in the classroom. And myself as the teacher facilitating the learning and the students responding to questions that are asked, it's a two-way conversation that we're having. And hopefully throughout the process, I'm not the only one that's asking questions. Hopefully I might stimulate their interest by getting them started with questions, but then hopefully the questions drive themselves and we have an ongoing dialogue related to the focus, the big idea question that drives the learning, and we're just communicating back and forth with one another. The effective questioning stimulates intellectual thought. It really drives students wanting to know more. It really encourages them to take the information they have, process it in a way through critical thinking and problem solving that will lead them to possibly right answers or maybe answers that hadn't even been considered. So it's really the type of thing that really stimulates the classroom environment. This student-to-student interaction. I don't want to think of myself as the teacher in the classroom who's the leader of the group. I really would rather consider myself as the facilitator of learning, that I would be asking questions of students to keep them on task, but to keep them going in the conversation. But I don't want to think of myself, once the questioning has started, as the initiator. I'm just going to keep it going and keep it flowing in a manner that's going to lead and align with the learning objectives. And related to those learning objectives, we want the students to get to the how and why of a situation and how and why something is occurring. We want them to go beyond just the what of the situation, the factual knowledge and just spitting back facts to me or to each other, but to process those facts in a way that shows they truly understand the concept. It really will assist students in being more metacognitive, in assessing their own learning and what it is they know and need to dig into further. And it will really help students in assessing a peer review standpoint, their fellow classmates, and whether their fellow classmates are on task or not, and how their opinions may shape my opinion. So overall, I feel that effective questioning sets up a classroom atmosphere that is engaging and promotes dialogue related to the topic at hand. So what are the benefits of effective questioning? Okay. And why institute effective questioning? Why develop these effective questioning skills? Well, the reason I feel that you should be engaged in asking effective questions and not questions in the classroom and just not off-the-cuff questions, that you've really thought these questions through before the students have even come into the room. You've maybe coming from a coaching standpoint, that you've really planned this out well and you know the questions that you want to ask. And these are the effective questioning benefits that you'll see present within your room whenever you institute effective questioning in your classroom. It encourages students to engage with their work and each other. Keeps them on task, keeps them interested. I think that's one of the key aspects in all education is, what do I need to do to truly keep the students engaged and wanting to learn more? It helps students to think out loud, which is totally okay. Sharing ideas with one another. Maybe they're working in small groups. Maybe they're working in a think, pair, share. Maybe it's just a 2-minute talk or some strategy like those that just keeps them thinking and processing information out loud. It facilitates learning through active discussion. I just mentioned that previously, that we have active dialogue going on in the classroom that stimulates the learning and encourages all students to participate in the discussion. It also empowers students to feel confident about their ideas. You know, in some situations, a student may not want to answer a question from student to teacher, but if the students are working in small groups or they're working with partners, they might be more inclined to bring out ideas and bring out the way they are thinking and address their misconceptions about a topic through that active discussion and feel more confident about the ideas that they're presenting. Effective questioning also improves speaking and listening skills. What is it I want to say? How do I want to say it to make my point and make my point in a clear manner? But also, am I active listening to what other people are saying? Am I taking in and processing what other students are saying and drawing my conclusions from those? That takes a special active listening skills that you're pulling out the key ideas and processing those in terms of a response through effective questioning. We already mentioned builds critical thinking skills, that I might be thinking about other ideas that I hadn't thought of before. Through questioning, might bring other ideas out. Teaches respect for others, people's opinions, and that's something we probably need throughout our society these days, is that we should respond in a friendly but yet active manner that doesn't downgrade another individual but respects their opinion, and we just make our key points in a manner that is ethical and moral and not judgmental in respect to other people's opinions. So honoring their opinions in a manner that just continues to drive the conversation. Help students to clarify their understanding. You know, many times an additional question may be needed because the first question was not real clear for that student. Maybe it's tied to the student's background knowledge and they need to dig further into that to clarify their understanding. So that's very important. We want to make sure that the questions are phrased in such a manner that all students know exactly what the question is addressing. Effective questioning motivates students and to develop an interest of the topic. You know, great thing in that is I was out today on my morning jaunt before the Zoom session was starting. I was listening to WHO radio, and news report came across that, and I don't know the specifics on this, but that in I believe it was a dwarf galaxy, some 3 billion or 300 billion light years away. I'll have to check into that further, but we'll just say 3 billion light years away, that a radio signal was received by some people in England, I believe, and it was a regular radio signal. And you know, just related to that from a science standpoint, what does that say to you? I would ask students, what do you think of that situation? Where do you think that radio signal is coming from? How do you think it was transmitted? What does the 3 billion light years away from Earth mean? When was that radio signal transmitted? You know, a topic of interest would be, well, you know, that radio signal was initiated 3 billion years ago from that dwarf galaxy. How have things changed in 3 billion years that it took that signal to reach Earth? A lot of interesting things can pop up from a topic depending on how you phrase the questions around it. And of course, effective questioning allows the teacher to check for student understanding. The way you address your questions will determine how students are going to reply, and you can use that as a formative type of assessment just to see which students are on track and which students need additional information. So those are the benefits of effective questioning in the classroom. Okay. So here again, I'm going to ask you to pause and reflect. Take a couple of minutes to pause the video once again and consider these couple of questions. How are you currently questioning your students in the classroom? And what type of questions are you currently asking your students? Go ahead and in a science notebook, on a scratch piece of paper, someplace handy, reflect for yourself, or if you're with another person, go ahead and share ideas with one another for a couple of minutes, and I will see you soon. Okay, welcome back again. So how are you currently questioning your students in the classroom? Are you asking just haphazard questions related to a topic, or are you planning those questions out? And what type of questions are you currently asking your students? Are they just rote memorization based on facts and you just want the students to spit out facts back to you? Or are you asking questions in a manner that will ask students to dig deeper and use that factual knowledge that they have to process those terms and answer questions in a clear and concise format, showing their understanding of the overall concept rather than just the details of the concept? Well, that leads us to the types of questions that can be asked in the classroom. There are closed-ended questions and open-ended questions in the classroom. Closed questions prompt a simple response. They're right there questions. They're yes, no, or just a small piece of factual information. They don't ask students to dig deeper. For example, are you feeling better today? That's a yes, no question. Does 6 plus 7 equal 13? Okay. Did Henry VIII have 6 wives? These are all examples of closed-ended questions which just have a right there answer present within them. Like the example I just gave you with that radio signal coming from the galaxy. How far away was it? Well, 3 billion light years. Okay. What came from the galaxy? Radio signal. Okay. Those are right there answers. Open-ended questions, on the other hand, ask students to provide more information. The open questions require a deeper level of thinking and prompt a lengthier response. Students are asked to think and reflect and provide opinions and feelings and take control of the conversation. That's the part I like. Take control of the conversation, dig deeper, provide more information, so clear understanding of what that question was addressing. So examples of open questions: what do you think of the ending of Romeo and Juliet? Asks for an opinion. Describe the role of insulin in the body. Asks you to take factual information, process that information, and show how the overall system works. How did you interpret the end of the film? Okay. Or explain the importance of the Battle of Somme. Okay. Or I might related just off the top of my head, brainstorm here for a second, related to the galaxy and radio signal again. I would probably ask students, how do you think that signal got here? Or how do you think that signal originated? Or what do you think the origin of that signal might have been? Okay. Where do you think that signal is possibly coming from within that dwarf galaxy? Questions that drive the conversation are open questions. Questions that close a conversation and just lead to an abrupt end are closed questions. Okay. So in looking at the types of questions that you can ask in the classroom and focusing on closed questions have their advantages and they have their disadvantages too. Again, closed questions prompt a simple response, such as a yes or no reply, or just a very, very short answer. But an advantage to that is, to a closed question, is they're quick and easy responses, a quick check of factual knowledge. They do help to reduce confusion. I mean, if the student is struggling with a quick answer to a closed question, you can go back and address where that student needs additional information to learn that learning objective. It challenges the student's memory. And again, hopefully I'm not giving the idea that memorizing and rote memorization does not have a place in the classroom. It most certainly does at the proper time. It's just that we use it not as a routine teaching strategy, but use it in a situation where we really want students just to know that factual knowledge. That's okay. It's just less of the rote memorization and more of processing the information, because closed questions do encourage memorization and recalling facts. Disadvantages to closed questions. The students are trying to guess what the teacher wants for an answer. They're trying to get inside your head and get to that right answer question. That could create a little bit of anxiety amongst students, that they may think they don't know the right answer and may be hesitant because they think they're going to give the wrong answer to your close-ended question. So it may be very abrupt and may end very quickly with no student response. Close-ended questions really do limit the student's opportunity to expand on an answer and provide reasoning or opinion. Just does not allow them to go deeper into the concept. Now, on the other hand, open-ended questions have several advantages. So before I get into the open questions, I want to again ask you to pause and consider. Pause the video, take a couple minutes to brainstorm for yourself, reflect for yourself on what are the disadvantages to open-ended questions versus the advantages. And we will be back in a couple minutes as soon as you start the video again. See you soon. Okay, welcome back again. Okay, so advantages of open questions is they enrich the learning experience, that sense of dialogue in the classroom, professional, educational dialogue, going back and forth related to the topic. Takes the learning deeper. It encourages individual thinking, where students can share their ideas with one another. They can share their opinions with one another. They can really process that factual knowledge and put it together in a way that represents an entire story that shows their deep understanding of the learning objective for that lesson. Open questions also assess student understanding and knowledge, and identifies gaps in the student's knowledge. And as you're facilitating the learning, maybe you're roaming the classroom, listening to questions, going back and forth, maybe asking open-ended questions yourself to continue conversations going within a small group, you can formatively assess whether those students are really right on track with their ideas, or whether their knowledge is a little bit vague in some areas and needs to be readdressed. And it definitely does apply for the application of the knowledge. It's not just learn this for the here and now, learn this for the test and then move on. It's that, did I really learn this? Did I really make this personally my information and accessible to me, that shows deep understanding? So are there disadvantages to open-ended questions? I can think of a few, and maybe you did too with your group. The one that I can think of is we are all limited by time in the classroom. I would almost bet that in many situations in your classroom, you just get a good conversation going with students, the bell rings, and it's time to move on. And sometimes, let's be honest, it takes a while to get students to that point, depending on their grade level. Middle school students, I know as a former middle school teacher, that sometimes just getting them on task and getting them interested in the topic can take quite a while. And then they have to move on to the next subject, to the next class period, depending on how your school is set up. So that's one of the disadvantages. They are more time consuming, but yet it sets the course for a great classroom environment where everyone's engaged and it's more student-centered than teacher-centered. So underneath this effective questioning icon here, I have a video that I want to take us to on questioning techniques. I'm just going to ask you to go through, watch the video. Feel free to pause it along the way if you would like. Jot down any ahas, questions, comments that you might have that you might want to see addressed later. So we're going to go to the video. I'll bring it up here, and it's only a couple minutes, so we'll go through here. Okay. So after watching the video, hopefully that clarifies in your mind the similarities and differences between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Both have their place within the classroom at the appropriate time. What I would like you to think of and just for yourself right now kind of reflect upon is, what type of questions do you tend to ask most often during classroom discussions and to engage your students? Are you asking more closed-ended questions requiring factual knowledge, or are you asking more open-ended questions which really drive a conversation? So with that, I'm going to ask you to pause the video again and reflect for a few minutes. And I want you to take some time to pause and reflect on open-ended versus closed-ended questions. Think of a current science lesson you have recently taught. Maybe your favorite lesson for the year, and one that you are very knowledgeable on because you've taught it so many times. And I'd just ask you to come up with a list of 3 to 5 closed-ended and open-ended questions and compare those to one another and look at the characteristics of those. Okay. So once again, if you would go ahead, pause the tape, come back when you're ready, and I will once again see you soon. Well, welcome back again So hopefully you came up with a list of close-ended and open-ended questions that relate to a unit that you've taught, and you can make adjustments in those to come up with a higher percentage of open-ended questions and a lower percentage of just close-ended questions. So for questions to be productive within your classroom, you need to implement them effectively and plan them out and have certain procedures in place that will drive those questions, encouraging student response. So these are some ideas for some techniques you might use within the classroom to do just that, to implement effective questioning. I would suggest implementing a no hands policy. A hand going up saying, I've got the answer, tends to focus on specific students who want to drive the conversation and does not allow for a general input on part of all students in the classroom. And in some cases, students are quick to raise their hand. You might ask them to put their hands down on their seat or sit on their hands so that they're not quick to have their hand go up, and engage in respectful conversations and answering questions when called upon, or as they engage in an active conversation with the rest of the class. Introduce a wait time. When you ask a question, pause and institute an appropriate wait time. And sometimes that takes lots of practice, because once we ask a question, if we don't get a response within 2 or 3 seconds, it can feel like hours, okay? Because you want that response right away. But in a lot of situations, for the question that you've asked, people are processing that question and they're developing an answer, and it's not a right there answer. But so, maybe practice a 10 to 15 second wait that will just allow people to think and process the question through. And if you aren't getting a response and your wait time is 10 to 15, maybe even 20 seconds, rephrase the question. Ask a clarifying question related to the first question that will just get people thinking deeper. Definitely plan ahead. Plan your questions out. What type of questions do you think your students are going to be asking related to the topic? For most of you, I would guess the lessons you're teaching, you've taught them several times. You probably have somewhat of an idea based on history what type of questions students are going to come up with. It would be not a bad idea to even have those questions pre-planned and written out on a 3x5 card so that you can address those with students when they come up and just have them readily available. And yes, use a mixture of questions. Ask some open-ended questions and some closed-ended questions. Intermix the questions together. Ask for, in some cases, for some factual knowledge, but also integrate into those some opinion questions, and so that they can provide the response to you in an effective manner, also using their factual knowledge to explain the overall concept. The questions do not always have to come from you as the teacher. Remember, you're the facilitator of instruction. So encourage your students to ask questions. Ask your effective questions in a manner that will get your students to ask questions, and not necessarily of yourself as the instructor, but of other students in the classroom. And again, in a respectful manner that does not judge people, but encourages the dialogue to go deeper. Prepare follow-up questions that would lead students, again, deeper into the content. Ask them to expand upon the idea. Ask them, why do they think that way? What supports their opinion that they just shared with you based on the question? And then get the students to question themselves, part of that metacognitive philosophy, that are they thinking the question through thoroughly? Do they totally understand this, or do they need to kind of process the information a little bit further to come up with a suitable answer. So not so much focusing on right or wrong, but focusing on what takes the conversation deeper into the content. So don't dismiss answers that students do not get right the first time, or that does not lead where you want them to lead. Ask additional questions. Again, plan those questions out so that when the students go slightly off task with their response, you can get them back in gear again with their answers in deeper thinking, and working and leading them, guiding them, facilitating the learning in a manner that will lead them to the correct answer, the correct concept, by instituting effective questions. So again, I'd ask you to pause and reflect on questions here. How could you apply the questioning techniques described to your classroom instruction? Taking a look at the previous slide, how could you apply each of these questioning techniques into your classroom? The no hands policy, the idea of wait time for responses from students so they can process information, the idea of planning ahead with a series of questions. Just like a coach has strategies for the game, you develop a strategy as an instructional coach and teacher on this is where I want the conversation to go. Asking a mixture of questions, open-ended and close-ended questions, engaging the students to ask questions themselves, preparing follow-up questions to take the learning further and deeper, getting students to be more metacognitive, and not judging students with right or wrong replies, but encouraging students to go deeper with those. So again, pause the tape. How would you apply those? And think again of a current science lesson that you are currently teaching. Again, maybe what your best lesson of the year. Create a plan on how you would apply these questioning techniques to your current teaching. And this could take some time, so feel free to just pause the video and come back, and we will continue when you are ready. Good luck. So, essentially, effective questions are planned beforehand. We mentioned that just previously. You plan them out, just like a coach, a football coach or a basketball coach designs plays and does pre-game planning. You as an educator can do pre-instruction planning on where your lesson's going to go and how you're going to develop effective questions to drive the student learning, and anticipate responses from students, and have questions developed that you can go to that will encourage them to want to go deeper and continue the conversation and be successful in their learning. When planning those effective questions, that's helpful in developing that sequence of questions that will help students build on their own understanding and go deeper in their own thinking. And most definitely, as you practice effective questioning skills, you have to be flexible. Yes, you might come up with a plan on a series of questions that you're going to ask, but don't think that they need to be sequential and that you're going to ask every one of these questions. In some cases they could be, but you're going to have to be flexible in your instruction and in your questioning, and know at the appropriate time when to ask those questions, when those questions would be necessary. So in order to encourage questions, to promote your students' thinking and reasoning, you can develop questions around the beginning of a lesson. Okay? And for many of you who have probably been through some of the modules with the Iowa Science Standards, some of this might sound familiar to you in developing questions. You develop questions around a storyline within a lesson plan, identifying a phenomenon within lessons, and maybe a phenomenon within a specific lesson, and asking students to develop their own questions around the storyline and the phenomenon. Progressing with a lesson I think of one example of a strategy with that is the driving question board, that you're asking students to develop their own questions, and you're encouraging students to come in with open-ended questions that will take the learning further and give them ownership in the process. You're interpreting and evaluating results within a lesson. Justification, that's part of the claims, evidence, and reasoning piece in science education, that students make a claim, they develop that something's going to happen, they collect evidence to support that claim, and then they provide reasoning and justification for that. Well, the questioning that you use is going to help determine how well they're able to justify their claim with their evidence and make those connections. So we need to develop questioning skills that will take them deeper into the factual knowledge that is represented within the lesson and explain that in a coherent manner. And then communicating conclusions and reflecting all has to do with professional dialogue. When I think of teaching students in a secondary science classroom, I think of students coming in, and when they come into my classroom, well, they are professional. They're professional scientists. They are thinking like a scientist. They are communicating like a scientist, both in writing and in speaking, in those communication skills, whatever manner. And we want to encourage effective questioning as part of that. So if there's a professional dialogue going on related to the topic, that the conclusions and reflecting the students are doing truly demonstrate, and the questions are pulling out that factual knowledge from the students in a coherent manner. So it's very important that everyone is included in thinking about the questions asked. We don't want students to be left out. We want all the students engaged in the classroom. We want all students to be part of that professional dialogue that's going on. So ask questions in a way that incorporates the entire class. Again, go back and apply that no hand rule, that we're having a conversation, people can volunteer, but it's going to be done in an active listening and active communicating format. Ask questions that encourage a range of responses. Again, that there's a sharing of ideas. Sometimes with certain lessons, there is no one right way to the conclusion, but there are several approaches that could be used in order to get to that point. Avoid teacher-student ping pong. You ask a question, the student replies. You ask another question, the student replies. This ping pong of going back and forth and back and forth. That's not driving the conversation. That's, again, is leaning more toward those close-ended questions that you're asking that aren't driving the conversation in the classroom. What would be ideal here would be you initiate the question, and then you get a student response, then another student response, then another student response. And then you might interject again to clarify the questioning that's going on, but it's more of a ratio of teacher, student, 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 teacher, something like that. And all focusing on open dialogue. And arrange the room to encourage participation. Okay? That you want all students to be a part of the process. Sitting in rows doesn't tend to do that, but organizing in groups and setting up a learning circle, or setting up your classroom maybe in a U-shaped fashion is more typical of having an ongoing conversation where everyone can participate. Plus, in a science learning circle, or setting up a U-shape with the desks, allows you to roam and get to the why, when, where, what, and how of the situation, and facilitate the questions that are being asked. Okay. So all these ideas will help to encourage effective questioning and encourage dialogue within the classroom. So we will continue tomorrow with principles of effective questioning and give students time to think and talk with some additional ideas and recommendations for your students. But At the end of this first part one Zoom session today, I would like you just to be thinking about and considering in the chat box or on a piece of paper how you would use effective questioning as part of your science instruction. As we begin to continue with this process tomorrow, again, how will you develop effective questions? How will you relate those to your lessons? And if you're watching this video between now and the second part on tomorrow on Friday, June 12th, then feel free to shoot me an email. Feel free to correspond with me. I check my email several times a day, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, we will continue with this Zoom session on effective questioning in secondary science part 2. Tomorrow's session will be live at 9 a.m. again, and will be recorded so that you can view that at your leisure. I want to thank you for attending today. Hopefully I've opened up some ideas for you on effective questioning. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.